All right, good evening and welcome to our March Sock Madness, March 14th. This is an annual event that we have at Knit Paper Scissors. We're a local yarn shop that's located in Lincoln, Nebraska. This year we'll celebrate our 8th anniversary, and our journey with socks has gone from not liking to knit socks, I guess it's my own journey, not liking to knit socks to now being crazy about socks. And as a store owner, I felt like it was important. A lot of people come in and say, one of the most requested items is, I'd like to learn to knit socks. I'd like to make socks for my family. And I thought, I really need to get up to speed on this. Personally, if I'm going to own a shop. So I set out on a journey myself to get better at sock knitting. And that has evolved and continues to evolve even to this day. Learned some new things last week and put those into action. And that's what I love about knitting, is there's always something new to learn. One of the things we work with folks on in their knitting or in their sock knitting is, I like to say that we're a no shame knit shop. So we have a lot of people that come in and say, oh, I don't knit right. I don't do it right. I do this kind of heel. I knit continental. I knit English. You know, any way you get it done is how it's to be. And that's fabulous. So it's all about the journey. It's all about the pleasure. It's all about what knitting does for us, not just in a product, but also personally, right? And so that's part of the journey, is learning and growing. And that's what we're going to learn from Denise tonight. So we welcome you. We do have a complete online shop. So anything, if you'd like to visit us, you can visit us at knit-paper-scissors.com. Follow us on Instagram. And you can even sign up for our newsletter. I send a newsletter out on Monday mornings, and that tells you everything that we have going on. And, you know, we've been celebrating the anniversary of the pandemic. I don't know if that's a good thing to celebrate, but I guess it kind of is, because we're 3 years beyond when it was this week, 3 years ago, that at the shop we closed our doors. And we were very uncertain about what was going to happen. And I said this on Monday, but I'll say it again. Thank you. And thank you for your support of our shop and wherever you shop, and your support of our podcasters like Denise, our support of Jessica from Lazy Bee Yarns. It's been vital to not just staying in business, but just our own well-being and our self-worth, to understand that we made it through. So we all made it through together, and weren't we glad that we had our knitting? So it is a bit of an anniversary, and just want to pause and say thank you. Thank you for your support, and continue to support your stores, your local dyers, your local podcasters all over the country, all over the world. And that's what's been great about Zoom. Sydney, Australia, all over. We have people that participate in all of our events. I think, Denise, I even told you I have a gal from Queens, New York, and she works at a library, and she'll jump on some of our Zoom. And I'm thinking, man, don't you have some yarn in New York? But she likes to plug into us, and everyone is welcome. You're welcome from wherever you are. And that means that we're really, really glad, really glad that you're here. So Denise, hello.
Everyone. How are you all? I thank you, Angie, so much for having me here. I am really excited to be here because I get to talk about sock knitting for an hour. Yay!
You know, Denise, let's have Anne tell us how we got to Denise. So we'll do that, and then we'll let you. Anne, you want to tell what Denise, talking to about sock knitting, what she did for you?
Sure. I would say I'm one of those people who learned to knit because they wanted to make socks. So it took me a couple of years. I got to the process of making socks, and then I couldn't get the heel. So those of you who are on Zooms with us a lot know this story, that instead of knitting the heel, I would just keep buying more needles. So I probably have 12 needles that were full to I didn't know how to do the heel. So I was like, I'll just Amazon, here you go. I'll just order some more. So then Angie did a heel class right at the start of the pandemic. I took it at her home, wasn't very good at it. Then she went to online, still wasn't very good at it. Then I stumbled across your No Fear Shorty sock classes, and I literally watched frame by frame by frame for the heel flap and gusset. I got it. I mean, I'm kind of a remedial student. It took a while, but eventually I got it. And then we were learning the fish lips kiss heel, and I came across your video. And again, frame by frame by frame by frame by frame. And now, after only 2 short years, I can knit it without looking, without watching your videos, with no patterns. So I would say because of you, I am a sock knitter. Thank you.
Oh, yay. That makes me so incredibly happy to hear. That will never get old, ever, ever, ever get old, hearing people say, thank you. Thank you, Anne, so much for watching. That class sort of started around the time of the pandemic. And it was just, I had taught classes in a yarn shop, physically in a yarn shop, and it's beginners that I think struggled. And we were all beginners. All of us were beginners at some point. And I feel like that gets lost sometimes. So I really wanted to address sock knitting to the beginner and just express over and over again that there's really nothing to be afraid of. Knitting in general is one of the few mediums that we have that if we make a mistake, we can just undo it. Just rip it out and start again. If you are a sewer, which I sew and quilt, once you cut the fabric, you're done. You may be able to still do something with it, but it may not be usable for that project. But with knitting, make a mistake, just rip it out. And a lot of people but look at how much time I put in already and I've gotten so far. It's just more time to play with the yarn. So I really wanted, with my classes and with my podcast, just to eliminate that fear and help people enjoy the sock knitting process. That was my goal with all of this. It's always been my goal. So, yeah.
So how did you get started, Denise? I mean, how did you, not just sock knitting, but tell us a little bit about your fiber journey or your knitting journey.
My knitting fiber journey actually started when I was 8. Which is how old my son is now. So that's kind of jarring for me a little bit, but that's another conversation. So I was 8 years old, and I learned from a friend, from a classmate. We called her Mitchie at the time, and she taught me how to crochet during recess on the playground at school. That's how I learned. And we would sit on this little rock wall that was incredibly uncomfortable, but I really didn't care. And she would sit there, and I got my little Susan Bates pink hook. I just liked it because it was pink. I knew nothing about sizes. I had no idea. It was just a pink hook. And I bought Red Heart from Woolworth. That's how old I am. Yes, from Woolworth. And I would, Mom, please, can we go to, let me put this sock down because I keep showing sneak peeks. Mom, can we go to Woolworth, please? And I remember the yarn department was downstairs. So I would go running downstairs, and nothing about, I'm so sorry, nothing about dye lots. I just grabbed whatever was pretty and started crocheting. And I bought Maggie Righetti's book, Crocheting, what is it? Crocheting Made Easy, I think was the name of her book. And I just wasn't getting any more from my friends. So then I started just teaching myself. Fast forward, I crocheted for years. Fast forward to 1999, and I was just about to start massage school. I am a licensed massage therapist, and just about to start school. And I used to walk from Midtown, which is 59th Street, down to 26th Street. And it was fall, and I saw these people in these sweaters. And it was a simple J. Crew style roll neck sweater. And I kept saying, I want to make one of those. And I want to, knitting seemed like the final frontier. It was 2 needles. Oh my gosh, I'm holding 2 instead of 1. And fast forward again, I learned from a CD-ROM. Am I really dating myself now? Does anyone even know what those are? I learned from a CD-ROM, and that was the beginning. I took a class at a yarn shop on the Upper West Side in Manhattan, and I was there every day after work. I would hop on the bus, take the bus up there, asking questions, and I started to feel like I was bugging them a little bit. So I said, okay, no problem. I can do this on my own. Went to the bookstore now at lunchtime, and I would sit there with books laid out in front of me because there was no YouTube at the time. There weren't knitting groups. There was a yarn shop, but I didn't have the time or the luxury to really hang out in the yarn shop. So I just learned how, from a one-dimensional book, how to create these three-dimensional items. And it just went from there. Fast forward again to really being into knitting now. And I ended up finding out about Elizabeth Zimmerman, and I bought her book, Knitting Without Tears. I'm so grateful that that was one of the first books I ever read, because it set me free. As far as Elizabeth said, there are no rules. You are the boss. You can knit whatever you want. There is nothing to worry about. If the gauge isn't right, change the gauge. If the size needle isn't right, change the needle. So I thought, oh, I'm in charge. I can do whatever I want. And that's how I learned and found out through her books about knitting camp. And I ended up going to knitting camp 3 years with Meg Swanson in Wisconsin. Meg Swanson is her daughter. And I learned to knit socks from Joyce Williams, who has now passed on. And I was addicted. That was the beginning. That was the beginning of it. And I remember one of the other teachers, Amy Denchant, who teaches with Vogue right now, she used to tease me all the time. She's like, but your feet are so small. You can get socks done in no time. She's like, I'm a size 11. It's like, I'm sorry. She was just so like, it annoyed her that I was a size 7. My foot has now grown to a 7.5 after having my children. But I couldn't stop. And then the stash growing started, and there's some of it right there. and I knit socks all the time. And I feel like socks have gotten me through the rough spots, the good spots. It's always with me. It's my Amex. I never leave home without it. I have literally gone to the grocery store for a loaf of bread with my wallet and a knitting bag. And my husband says to me, what are you doing? I said, but what if I get a flat tire? What if I get stuck in the store? What if there's a storm between here and there and I can't make it back? I need something to do. So it's always, always, always with me. And I wanted to share my passion and enthusiasm for it. And No Fear sock knitting and all the rest of it is now history.
So how did you get started then with the podcasting and I know you have a real passion for teaching and not just podcasting, but filming your tutorials, and what kind of got you going that way? I mean, we're seeing lots of comments about your tutorials are the only thing I listen to. They're the only thing I do. So how did that evolve?
To be really honest, you all may laugh. I did it as a challenge to myself 6 years ago. I didn't like my face. I didn't like my voice. I hated pictures of myself, video of myself. And I just decided, I don't even remember what birthday it was. And I just decided it was September 1st. And I said, okay, everybody, I was on Instagram and I said, I live by do one thing a day that scares you. That's one of my mantras. And I said, okay, I am going to record and upload a tiny little video every day so that I could get used to hearing myself and seeing myself. And then someone said, well, why don't you just put it on YouTube as a podcast? And I thought, that's too many people. But I said, okay. And I remember uploading that first video, and I was sort of like, close my eyes and I hit the upload button, and the sound was bad. And people used to tell me all the time, like, could you talk a little louder? And the sound isn't right. And the lighting's not right. And nothing was right. And then I loved making videos. That's another creative expression that I loved doing. So now I started watching videos on YouTube on how to make videos. And I bought all the equipment and the rigs and the arms and everything. And I just thought, okay, well, other people are doing tutorials. Can I try too? And I stuck my toes in the pond, and the water felt pretty good. So I just kept doing it. And here you go. Here I am. I was more afraid to not do it and regret it than I was afraid to do it.
Great example for all of us in whatever it is in our lives. that we want to do. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So tell us about this heel. I know for myself, it's been life-changing. And I know we have some new, I just taught a class this Saturday. I see some of you on, so hello. And I know that right now they might be shaking their head and saying, I don't think I can ever accomplish this. I don't think I can ever do it. And we're like, yes, you can.
You
So
can.
tell
You
us about the
absolutely
heel journey and just walk us through that for us.
So I started knitting socks, and I used Kat Bordhi, who's also passed away now. I used Kat Bordhi's sock Soar on 2 circular needles. The store that I bought it from no longer exists. It was up in Poughkeepsie, but I found this book, and it took me so long to figure out what she was trying to explain in this written format to create this 3-dimensional thing, this heel. But I figured it out, and I started doing it on 2 circular needles, and I always turned my sock in profile. And I thought, well, that's the only heel that exists. It's a heel flap and gusset with a heel turn. That's the only one that's out there. And it never occurred to me that there was anything else. And then I discovered the Fish Lips Kiss heel, which is by Patty Joy. I forget her last name. She's the socks therapist, I think is her Instagram name, and fell in love with it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a short row heel. This fits better. It looks better. It's quicker to knit. This is amazing. What is this? Oh my goodness, there's more than one kind of heel. So I'm very inquisitive if I could just learn new things for the rest of my life, I'd be the happiest person. So I thought, okay, well, if there's the Fish Lips Kiss heel, what else is out there? And I kept going back and forth between that and the heel flap and gusset. Again, long story short, someone said I couldn't teach the Fish Lips Kiss heel, or I chose not to because it is a paid for pattern. So someone said, oh, have you ever heard of shadow wrap short rows? And I thought, no, but I'll take the bait. Okay, let's go find out what that is. And I watched several videos on YouTube, thank goodness for YouTube. And I thought, oh, this is game changer. What is this? There's no counting. There's no memorization. It was the most intuitive thing I had ever knit. And I thought, I have got to share this with everyone. I didn't see anything written anywhere that it was owned by anyone. So I just thought, okay, there's very little in knitting that hasn't been taught by other people that is truly new. And I feel like a lot of people, even if it is owned by someone, many people are very open to try it your way, knit it your way. This written instruction or that video may not speak to you. There's so many other options. So I thought, okay, let's knit it. Loved it. I said, maybe I could record a tutorial on it. And here we are. And it worked, and I loved it, and then started playing with it. And it became this pattern. So this is the sock exploration. And I had started reading Lara Neel's book, Sock Architecture, which has a gazillion different heels and toes and sock construction. And it became a sock exploration. And a friend of mine, I don't know if some of you may know Hey Brownberry, Marceline Smith, she used the phrase sock exploration, and it stuck. And that became the name of this pattern with the heel. And there's so many things you can do. So this is just the basic heel. I hope everyone can see that. Just the basic Fish Lips Kiss, shadow wrap short row heel. And it is very similar. So I saw a question earlier from Bella, I believe. I'm kind of trying to scroll back. What's the difference between the two? The basic format of the two heels is the same. It is a short row heel, but there's an extra step. There's a couple of extra steps in the Fish Lips Kiss heel that are not in a shadow wrap short row heel. Again, I can't go into, I choose not to go into detail. The best way to figure out what the differences are is if you knit both and see what works for you. What I started doing also was knitting a pair of socks with 2 different heels so that I could walk in them and see, well, which one feels better, which one pulls over the instep, which one don't I like. And they're teaching pieces, they're learning tools. So there's something about the shadow wrap short row heel that had more give and a little bit more room across the instep, which is a very, very common complaint among knitters, that the instep is too tight or there's a lot of pulling and stretching. And I just found there was a little bit more space across this area with this heel. So it can be done cuff down, it can be done toe up. The instructions stay the same. You don't have to change anything. It can also be done as an afterthought heel. That is done as an afterthought. So what I basically did with this heel, I knit my sock and I started top down. So I'm knitting, knitting, knitting. I put in a marker where I wanted to insert the heel. I kept knitting, I finished, I went, and actually I don't ever finish. I usually stop about here so I can put my hand on the inside. And I picked up stitches on one side, knit the shadow wrap heel, and then grafted all of the stitches onto the other side.
Fabulous.
Why? Because I can. It was just something to try. It was just, again, it's that need to experiment and try different things. I just wanted to see, could it work? Yes, for those of you that don't like Kitchener stitch, that may not be an option for you because you're now Kitchener stitching 32 stitches. Ew, that may drive some people crazy. They don't want to do that. And then I experimented with it a little bit more because I was getting a little pucker on the side. So it's just playing with different options. Another option with that heel, with the shadow wrap short rows, is a shadow wrap short row toe, which I did here. So what I did there, so the heel is the same. I did the heel the same way. I'll take it off the needle so you could see that. And what I did here, so I cast on the cuff, worked the shadow wrap short row heel. When I got down to where I would start the toe decreases, I did a shadow wrap toe. I just did the shadow wrap toe. So basically I put in a heel, quote unquote heel, at the toe. I created that pocket at the toe and then grafted it onto the top of the sock. And then I did the other pair, its mate, I grafted to the bottom of the sock just to see, can I feel it? I don't know. I just, again, it's that doing them differently just to see if I could feel and see a difference. So yeah, that's
How exciting.
So this is what I do in my spare time when I'm bored. I just experiment with different things and try to come up with, someone saying, how does this compare to Cat Bordhi's sweet potato heel? The sweet potato heel looks much more similar to an umbrella heel, or actually even better, it looks like the decrease is very similar to the decreases on a hat. There's more steps in the sweet potato heel. I think it's an incredibly clever heel, but to some, it may feel a little fiddly. So it really is, wearing wise, they feel the same on my feet. I don't feel a difference between them. That's me. And I always say to people that what works for one person may not work for another. I say, try it, just experiment with it, have fun with it, see what works for you. And then my other option is just to do it as a contrasting. So here it's done in the same color. And then you also have a contrasting option. This can also be done, this heel can also be done 2 at a time. So I have a tutorial for that as well. It's very, very versatile. It really, really is. It's comfortable, it's versatile. There's so much that you can do with it. So there
Fabulous. I agree with you on the fit, the exact what you're talking about, the fit. The shadow wrap just fit just a smidge better. And I also think that what I like is your boldness in being willing to try different things. And I encourage our sock knitters, and why don't you scroll through and see if there's questions. But I encourage the sock knitters to try a heel and flap, to try all of the different things,
Mhm.
because then you know what you like. Then you find out what really works. So congratulations for being willing to kind of experiment on that. And I love your idea of grafting. So when we're saying grafting, that would be, as you mentioned, the Kitchener.
Kitchener,
Right. So that
exactly.
would be the terminology that a lot of us might be familiar with our toe, but to think
Mhm.
about Kitchenering the heel in. So Denise, could we do that? Like, even, I have a lot of people say, well, what if my heel wears out? What do I do? And I'm kind of fond of getting my scissors out and cutting things off and
Cutting it off.
starting again. Right.
Exactly.
So I'm hearing you say that then you could pick up those stitches and then knit your afterthought and graft it right in. Would that be correct?
Exactly. That's exactly what you can do. Because again, and you can also do that with the toe. If you're doing the shadow wrap short row as a toe, because those are the two areas that tend to wear out the most or the quickest. So you can just unpick your stitches or just snip it off, unravel back, put in a safety line if that works for you, and then just re-knit the area that's worn out. It's so, again, it seems, oh my gosh, that's a little bit too scary. I can't do that. But you know what? I'll tell you a very quick story. I went, we took the kids to a water park and there was a zip line out in wherever, in the woods, wherever. And we all trekked out there and we're all going to do the zip line. And you know what? I got to the top and wouldn't jump. I was so terrified to jump. And my daughter's like, "Whoa!" Like she just jumps clean off and she goes, I'm like, this is the most frightening thing ever. So when I hear people say, well, I'm scared to knit socks, I'm like, what on earth are you scared of? You're not going to die. The zip line's not going to break. Like, I was just, it's your fear is all relative. It's all relative. Just experiment, have a great time. Can I use the shadow wrap heel on a, yes, you can. It can be done in either direction, cuff down or toe up. So yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
I love that example of the zip line. Did you go? Did you jump and go?
No, of course not. I walked all the way back down. I did the walk of shame. I had the tech guy took all the gear off and I walked all the way back down and then walked the mile to meet my family. And they're all standing there like, oh, you're awful. You're such a wimp. Like, call me whatever you want. I wasn't jumping.
Well, thanks for being honest and transparent about that. So for the rest of us that back away from something, and what questions have we got that we can ask Denise here that people been, I'm seeing some good ones coming. So what are some of those that we can ask for Denise, Ann?
Becky asked, she's doing her first DK socks and she has 40 stitches in the pattern. And so her heel is 20 stitches. How should she divide the 20 into thirds? What's the rule for if does it divide evenly? That's the first question.
Okay, so let me answer that one. Hold on one sec. So you can divide it into thirds. If your thirds are not even, have the extra stitches on the sides. Does that make sense? So if we're doing, 18 divided by 3 is 6. So you're going to have 2 extra. So you'd have 7, 7, and 6 in the middle. Okay. Always put the extra stitches on the ends. And you can keep those center stitches. Now, if you wanted it a little bit wider, you could do 6, 6, which is 12, and 8 in the center. All right. What that will do, so the wider your, the more, let me start again. The more stitches you have in the center of that third, the center third, all right, the more stitches you have, the more shallow the shadow wrap short row heel is going to be. Okay, which means you're doing less back and forth. So it's going to be a little bit more shallow. The less stitches you have in that center third means your heel will then be deeper. Okay, but sometimes that extra depth may not always be what you want, because you may end up getting your heel may end up being almost a little too pointy. Okay, so the fit, you may get a little pouch like at the back of your heel. You have to experiment with that. Everybody's foot is different, and people have messaged me, well, how many stitches exactly should I cast on? I don't know. It's being 100% honest. You have to play with it to see how many stitches works for your foot. Okay. You have to play with it. But in general, more in the center, shallow, less in the center, deeper.
Great tip. What else, Anne?
Okay, Becky also asked, once in a while, I get a hole at the start or the end of the shadow wrap heel or both. Any helpful tips for this?
If you're getting holes, I think I can show you on this one. Hang on. I'm going to put the ball. Okay. So if you're getting a hole right in here, okay, as you're working the shadow wrap short row heel, don't go all the way to the end. So you have your 32 stitches across the back of the heel. So let's say I'm ready to start. Okay, let's pretend the heel's not in yet and I'm about to put a heel in here. Okay, so I'm going to put the heel in. Instead of knitting all the way over, I'm kind of holding this up so I can't really see my face, but instead of knitting all the way to the last stitch on the needle, go one stitch in. And you can do that on the other side. So when you turn and you purl one stitch in from the end. Does that make sense to everyone? So that will help eliminate that extra space, that extra gap that you'll get between the heel and the instep. Okay. Doesn't affect anything when you're finished. You just keep knitting that single stitch that's been kind of hanging out. Doesn't affect anything, doesn't change depth or anything like that. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through the chat. Yeah.
You know, one of the things, Denise, that would be like with the same color, right?
Mhm.
I mean, and of course, but one of the things I like about what you teach is when you add the color in and you do the weaving as you go. And that's how I really get things cinched up, is that weaving of that's why I like a different color, because I can really cinch up my sides really well with that. And you have a tutorial on those, right?
On weaving in your ends?
Well, weaving in, like when you start a new color in a heel.
Yes. Yeah, detail on how to change color with the heel, as well as just weaving in ends in general. If you want to make, this scrappy sock, okay, watch this. Hang on. Let's turn this inside out. Okay. And that is the hot mess happening on the inside. So this is what it looks like on the inside. And I purposely I sometimes just forget to cut the ends off, and I've actually worn my socks like this, but I am actually weaving in the ends as I'm knitting. So I don't ever have to stop and weave the ends in at the end, because that's one of the biggest deterrents that a lot of people have from making scrappy socks or just changing color in general. So I just weave them in at the end, and then I snip them off maybe 1/4 of an inch, give myself a little wiggle room. I've never had a sock come undone. It doesn't pull apart. So there you go.
Fabulous. And I too have worn I had a cowl once that I still haven't woven in the ends, and I'm just wearing it around and the ends are hanging out. Who cares?
So I'm sorry. I see a message from Susan. I can answer that. Have you tried putting in a small gusset with the shadow wrap heel or any short row heel to increase the instep girth? Yes. Mina Phillip, who is the knitting expat, has a pattern. It's her vanilla recipe. I think it's called basic vanilla sock or vanilla recipe. I can get that information to you, Angie, but it's available on Ravelry, and she has a mini heel flap adjustment is what she calls it. And basically, so to answer the question, yes, you can put in a little mini gusset before starting the shadow wrap heel, and that will give you that extra space, a little extra room or girth, to use her word, in the instep. So I've done it with the shadow wrap heel as well as a fish lips kiss heel. So it can be done. So yes.
Okay. When we post this back on YouTube, we will put that information, and we will put the link there with our patterns we talked about too.
Right. No problem.
Okay, great. Anne, is there other questions we've missed?
Kay asked if she would be willing to talk about her pattern designing journey.
Sure. I don't know that it's much of a journey. I mean, I've done 3 patterns, and they are, I want my patterns to be, to provide opportunities to learn new things. That's basically what I have in the back of my mind when I'm designing a pattern. So my No Fear Shorty sock was an accompaniment pattern to the class, because sometimes people want to have something physical to knit along with, and they feel more comfortable if there was something designed specifically for the class. So that's where that first pattern came about. Again, some people are independent enough to see a tutorial for a heel and go, okay, I can just plug that into a sock, no problem. Others want a little bit more structure, and they'd rather have it in an actual pattern. Once they're more comfortable, then they can go on and do their own thing. So I basically design with the beginner in the back of my mind. Is this something a beginner can do? Is it readable? Is it understandable? I try to do it in baby steps, like just a little bit at a time. You know, I'm not, the lace and the cables and all of that stuff. I mean, my last pattern, One More Step, does have a cable pattern in it, but it's a really, really simple one. You don't need a cable needle. It's basically just introducing you to new ideas and new techniques. Sock knitting is the perfect canvas for learning new techniques. If you want to try a cable, but you don't want a whole sweater with cables all over it, because that feels like climbing Everest, as opposed to just going up a nice little hill on a casual walk in the park, then do yourself the favor and try it on a sock. You can try lace, cables, color work, intarsia, entrelac, what you think of it. If it's done in knitting, brioche, you can do it in a sock. So that, I think I answered the question. I design with the beginner in mind.
And you can find Denise's patterns, of course, on Ravelry and Earthtone Girls. Is that
on my website as well? Yes.
And on your website as well.
Ravelry.
Yeah. How do you knit your socks? Do you knit DPNs, magic loop? What's your favorite technique, or where do you land with that?
I love the look and tradition of and the elegance of double pointed needles, but we don't get along at all. They don't like me, I don't like them. So I use 2 circular needles, and I learned that from Kat Bordhi's book. And that technique applies to everything I do. So I've used 2 circs for sweaters, if it's anything in the round, I will use 2 circular needles. And I use Addy Turbos, Addy Rockets, and Hiya Sharps. Those are my 2 go-to brands. It just makes sense to me logically to use 2 circular needles, because I have half of the garment on one side, half on the other. And there's less opportunity for gaps at intersections. There's only 2, as opposed to having 4 or possibly even 5 intersections if you're using double pointed needles. So yeah. And you can get your circular needles at any length. So I've even done a full length cable coat on a very large circular needle. So it works. And there's amazing footage. If you all can find it, there's amazing footage of Meg Swanson and Elizabeth Zimmerman knitting together on circular needles at the same time. One is on one side of the sweater and one's on the other side, and they just keep turning the sweater around. It is just, oh my gosh, it's just amazing. This is how excited I get over this kind of thing.
Well, think about that. We could get that if you had somebody doing that. How it's like knitting double time.
Yeah.
Right.
As long as you all are basically the same speed, you can just keep that thing moving. So
yeah, and the same gauge.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that. I'm gonna look that up. We talked about, or I think you and I visited about ladders. That's kind of a common, a common thing that comes up. If you've got Denise here, so if you've got questions, be thinking about it as she answers this question. If there's something you want to ask her, this is your opportunity about sock knitting, about knitting in general, anything like that. So you want to talk about ladders a little bit? And that's a
Sure.
common thing, I think, with folks.
It is very, very common. It's a really, really simple fix. Basically what happens, and I tend to shy away a little bit from magic loop. A lot of people love magic loop, and it's the only technique that they use. Thank you, Christine. I find you get, once you look, so if you look at this sock, I've got my 2 circular needles. Here is the intersection, okay? And there's another on the other side. So what's basically happening, if you don't close that gap, that's when the ladder starts to form. All right. And ladder basically looks exactly, so I'm going to pull this apart so you can kind of see what I mean. You start to get what looks like almost like you've dropped a stitch. You really haven't. It's just there's too much space there. So really super quick fix. And for those of you who are wondering, I've got the ball of yarn inside the sock. Just another little tip. I pop it inside. Wait, whose face? Kelly? Kelly's jaw just dropped. That was so great. So what I do here, let me see if I can show you. So I don't have a camera. I don't have a camera over my hands, but I think you'll still be able to see it. So I will knit into the first stitch. Now, can you see that one needle is in front of the other? So if I turn,
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, you can see it. Okay. So one needle's in front of the other. So my back needle is hanging out here. It's just resting there. I start to knit the first stitch and I go into the second stitch. Because of the position of that needle, it's forcing a space there. No matter how hard I pull, that space is going to be there. But I'm going to undo that and go back. Hang on. Okay. I'm not wearing my glasses, but I think I can do this. Hang on. Okay. So if I do that again, I go into the first stitch, but I take this needle and push it under the needle that I'm using. The gap is now gone. Can you see that? So when I go into that stitch now, I knit the first and I knit the second, and that gap is gone. And
Fabulous.
it's just as simple as flipping that one needle you're not using under the needle you are using, the cable. Can you do this with magic loop? Absolutely. You absolutely can. Just flip it underneath, double pointed needles, put the double point you just finished using and tuck it under the one you're currently using.
So simple.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Such-
super. It's a very simple fix. And I used to get ladders and it drove me nuts and I couldn't figure out what was happening. And I accidentally one day pushed it out of my way and realized that the gap was gone. So that is, and it's automatic now. It's just an automatic move. As soon as I start a row, I just push that cable right under and the ladder disappears.
I'll be darned. Great. Great. And, these are all just things that, as Denise is explaining it, you might be going, but just get your sock out and try it. We work a lot on magic loop. There are people doing all kinds, but I teach magic loop. And so same kind of thing. Many of you've got one in your hand. When we're done tonight, take it and try it and experiment with it, right?
Exactly. Just give it a try.
Okay, fabulous. Do we have other questions? Anything else, Anne, that's come up?
I didn't see any more, but I would like to ask what Denise's advice would be to people who are maybe newer sock knitters and are discouraged or are maybe struggling a little bit to master the sock knitting skill. What advice do you have for someone like me 3 years ago?
Take your time. Take your time. Turn your phone off. Don't look at Instagram. Don't compare your sock to someone else's, because that is a big mental block, because you're looking at someone else's sock that looks perfect and you're like, mine doesn't look like that. And oh, I'm working so hard and I'm trying so hard. Just practice. It takes time. I recently saw some reel on Instagram, and it was Dr. So and somebody or other. And he basically said that people that have mastered something Do it over and over and over and over again. And even if they've mastered it, they keep doing it. Okay, over and over again, till it just becomes such a part of you, a part of your hands, part of your mental psyche, part of who you are. Now, granted, I know I'm being a little dramatic. It is sock knitting, but but just take your time and do it over and over and over again is really what I recommend. And sometimes this used to happen in my classes a lot. I found people I would say something or demonstrate something, and they would immediately look down at what they were doing and start doing it right away. No, watch the whole thing first, pause, then you do it. Watch it again, pause, then you do it. You can't learn it while you're looking and trying to do it at the same time. It doesn't, your brain doesn't work that way. And I think some people are trying to force themselves to do it that way because they want to get it done really quickly. There's also this awful urgency where you have to get it done really fast. I have to do this fast. No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't. Just take your time, go slowly. What I love about YouTube is that if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't sleep and you pick up your sock, you can watch. You're not disturbing anyone. Just go right on there and watch it again. I say it's Denise on demand. So just watch whenever you want. You're not bothering me. You're not disturbing anyone. No one cares if you've watched the same piece of footage 20 times. It does not matter until it clicks with you. And you know what? I try very hard to also not have an ego with this. If you're watching a video, whether it's mine or someone else's, and it's still not clicking, after you've watched it that 20 times, maybe that's not the tutorial for you. Mm-hmm. So try someone else. You know, when you hit sock knitting, pages, hundreds of pages of tutorials pop up on YouTube. There's so many people out there doing it. There's paid for classes, there's free classes. Find a teacher that speaks to you in the way that your brain can understand. I think that's really key. If mine isn't working, it's okay. No hard feelings. Go find somebody else until it clicks.
Let's see, we've got a couple more questions here.
Sure.
What's the advantage of putting the ball into the sock?
Oh, it doesn't roll around. I've actually just literally run out the door. There is really no advantage. Sometimes I don't want to carry my bag, or I want to put the knitting bag like down inside, and also if I'm knitting and this ball is rolling around in my knitting bag, it will tangle sometimes with other balls. Really annoying. So I just tuck it, and this I've got just too much wound off on this right now, but wind it off, tuck it in the ball, tuck it right into the sock rather, and then I just pull it out as I need it. It's also a great conversation piece. It just makes you look really cool to have it like tucked in there. Because people are like, ooh, what's that? What are you doing? You're like, oh, it's just this, this is just this technique that I do, and don't even have to explain. Just be cool about it. I love 9-inch needles. Can you do a pattern socks on 9-inch? You can do, so 9-inch needles. Let's talk about 9-inch needles for a minute. Those also don't agree with me because I find them physically uncomfortable to knit with. That's really all it is. As a massage therapist, my goal is to prolong the life of my hands, wrists, arms, shoulders for as long as I possibly can. I want to be knitting until I have a foot in the box. You know what I mean? I don't want my hands to die on me. I want my hands to work. So if I use 9-inch needles, I tend to get a pain right across the back of my knuckles, right across here, because I'm holding like this and I'm pinching. And I physically find that uncomfortable for long stretches of time. I can't physically do it. When I'm using a longer needle, magic loop, it doesn't matter. This length from here to here, my entire hand can rest on it. So it's just more, and I'm not gripping it. I'm not holding really, really tight. I'm not white knuckling it, but I'll just put my hand just rests more comfortably. It has a place to hang out. So there's no specific spot where I'm getting the stress. But can you do a full sock on a 9-inch needle? Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that have really embraced 9-inch, and I'm with you, Denise. It just doesn't work for me. But a lot of people have tried them and have really good success as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I just did a cowl on a 16-inch needle. And the beauty of a 9-inch needle, or when it's just continuous knitting, you know, you don't have to get to an intersection and then stop, change to another needle, stop, change to another needle. You're just going, 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 going. So I understand the appeal of it. It's just, again, it doesn't work for me, and I want to preserve my hands.
Right, fabulous. So we're about ready to be done.
Mhm.
But tell us a little bit about your family, and then I think you have you have a little show and tell as well. So right, a little preview of something. So why don't you tell us about your family, Denise?
They are, I have my husband, who I have been with for 7 years now. I have a daughter who's 13, a son who is 8, and they know that knitting is a thing. They know that it's real. They know when mommy's counting, do not ask a question. You must wait. I don't have to start counting louder, because if they see my head down, they know that I don't tend to look at my hands. So if I'm looking down, I'm like, oh, now is not the time. Now is not the time. So they fully embrace my knitting. They are not shy. They don't mind. I knit standing in the parking lot, waiting for them to come out of school. It is always on the go. So I remember does anyone remember wool mice? Wool mice, I think I'm saying that right. It was a German yarn, was really, really popular years ago. My husband used to sit in front of the computer waiting for the updates so he could buy it for me. And he didn't understand like this cart jacking thing, and like, why couldn't he get it? And it became personal for him. He was like, I want the yarn. So he shops for yarn for me. He understands that my family embraces my making. I know sometimes when you have children, your partner will give you jewelry you've had a baby gift. I got a Bernina sewing machine when my son was born. So yeah, they embrace who I am and my making. My daughter's threat to me is, I said to her, I will put in my will to please bury me with yarn and needle so I have something to do. I don't want to just lay there. And she says, well, as long as you leave me something in your will, I will bury you with the right size needle. Because she knows, she's like, if you get me angry just after you die, I'm going to bury you with the wrong size needle. So that is the extent to which my children understand how important it is.
Fabulous.
They definitely get it. So
and are they knitters? Are they knitters or crocheters?
They have my daughter made a cowl. My son currently has a project on needles. He just asked me last week he's like, Mom, can I knit? I said, of course you can. He says, well, do boys knit? I said, of course they do. I said, the first knitters were men. They weren't women way, way back in the day. Okay. I said, it was the men who used to knit, not the women. I said, of course you can knit. So he's sitting there and I showed him how to cast on, and he's like, okay. And I'm showing him with my right hand, and he takes the yarn in his left and starts knitting. And I said, wow, I said, you're really good at this. He's like, hello, I've been watching you. How old am I now? So he's like, Mom, we breathe yarn fumes all day long. Of course I know how to knit. So yeah, he gets it. He totally gets it. And my husband and I knit a sweater together. I was knitting a sweater, and he reached over very, very gently and took it out of my hands, very lovingly, very gently. He took it out of my hands. He knit one stitch perfectly and then handed it back to me. So as far as I'm concerned, we knit that sweater together, and we still have it. It's still in the closet. So let's talk about should I show it now?
Absolutely. Time to show.
Okay. So Jessica of Lazy Bee Yarns dyed Bird's Eye View, an earthy colorway for this event. And there it is. I honestly think Kelly's got the best face on this Zoom tonight. So here is the colorway, and here it is knit up. So let me get to the end of the round. Hold on.
Tell us about, you told the story today in your podcast about
I did.
about how your reaction to it. And I think that's a great story, Denise.
So Angie graciously told me about this colorway being dyed. So I kept an eye out on the mailbox, and I drive to the post office and I get it, and rip the package open, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, wow, this is really pretty, but not necessarily colors I would pick for myself. There were a lot of greens in here, and like some of the greens looked a little neonish. And I thought, oh, it's really pretty, but I'm not sure. So I left it out on the passenger seat, and as I'm driving home, there is a view of the Hudson River and the Palisades in New Jersey. And I'm driving, and all of a sudden I went, oh, wait a minute. This does look like a bird's eye view. It's amazing. I said, there's the blue sky, there's the ocean. Some of the trees are just starting to bud. So you have like the rusty kind of color, and some of the dead leaves haven't gone yet. And there's like that beautiful light spring green color. That's what I saw as neon, but it's that beautiful spring green. I thought I had a whole new perspective in the 1 mile it took me to drive from the post office to my home at how beautiful this colorway is. And here it is. So there is the cuff. So I did a little garter stitch. Let's turn it this way. Sorry. I did a little garter stitch cuff. Why? Because I'd never done it before and was just curious. So I did a little cuff here, heel flap, just a slip stitch heel flap. And I am now happily cruising down the foot. And I would show you this. This fits so perfectly, but I don't think it would be fun for any of us if I tried to get my foot up by the camera. That wouldn't be fun for anyone. So we'll just trust me. Suffice to say, it's a beautiful colorway and looks great. This sock looks great on my foot. So, well, and I will let you cover the details on availability on this beauty.
You bet. That sounds great. You know, it's always fascinated me when we work with dyers and their concepts and our concepts and those coming together. And when Jessica, I said, well, Denise likes earth tones, and obviously it's her podcast name, Earthtones Girl. And then she brought that in, and at first I was like, I don't see it, but then she said bird's eye view, and I'm like, oh, you're looking down on the earth. And what would you see when you're looking down on the earth? The ocean, the trees, and all of that. Exactly. So I think that's what's fabulous about this whole process, is being able to stretch and grow and say, oh, maybe that wasn't my color, but wow, I'm loving it now.
Loving it. Absolutely loving it. Exactly.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap up. And then we'll give you the details about that colorway. And we also want an opportunity for you guys to leave in your comments, anything that you'd like to share with Denise. Denise, thank you.
Pleasure.
So absolute much pleasure. For changing many of our lives with your tutorials. I just have to say, in doing YouTube myself, and didn't really want to be in that business, the YouTube business, but yet there's a demand for hearing from you or hearing from people. And I had done them, and I don't even do any heel tutorials. I send them all directly to you, because you are the easiest and for me. And so then that translates to everybody else that I'm touching or working with. I just say, this gal, you're just going to love her. You're just going to love her. And that's what everybody has shared. So
thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I had the best time. Thank you to everyone who's here, who joined in. Thank you all so much for being here.